Anne Hathaway by Caroline Duffy is written about Shakespeare's wife, and it's written from her point of view. The thing is though, Shakespeare's love life was very complicated. A bit of a soap opera actually.
Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours. Just a friendly wave each morning helps to make a better day. Neighbours need to get to know each other.
So let me break down Shakespeare's love life for you. William Shakespeare, at the age of 18, begins a relationship with Anne Hathaway, who's in her mid-20s. There's about an 8-year age difference between the two, which was quite unusual in a time when men would normally marry younger women. But she was a widow, she may have had some money, and this might have made her quite a sweet prospect for him. I ain't saying he's a gold digger, you know the rest. But then, as far as we know, that relationship must have kind of broken off a little bit, because the next thing you know, we've got records of a William Shakespeare, we don't know for sure that it's him, but a William Shakespeare living in Stratford-upon-Avon, and there can't have been that many of them, being about to marry a woman called Anna Whatley, played here by Gwyneth Paltrow. And all of a sudden, that marriage seems to have stopped. And the next thing you know, William Shakespeare is marrying Anne Hathaway. And there's the clue. You see, after William Shakespeare and Anne Hathaway were married, a child was born, I think about 7 or 8 months after the wedding. Now, in a time when sex before marriage was frowned upon, you think about that carefully. It means that it's quite likely that this marriage came about because William Shakespeare got Anne Hathaway pregnant. I mean, we don't know that, but that's a suggestion. And some historians believe that, you know, it was actually Anne Hathaway's family who forced them to marry, because it would be quite a dreadful kind of shame and a disgrace for her to be an unmarried mother, especially as a widow. So they had their children, you know, Susanna, 6 months after the wedding, sorry, and the twins Hamlet and Judith. And then immediately after that, or shortly after that, Shakespeare leaves his wife and goes down to London. Bit odd, don't you think? And we don't really know why. There are a number of theories. They're called Shakespeare's lost years. Some people think that he became a horse doctor and started looking after horses that were involved in theatre productions, not acting horses, you know, horses used by theatre production companies. Or that he became, you know, he was wanted by the police and he escaped to avoid prosecution. My favourite theory, though, is that he became an English teacher. I quite like that theory. But basically, he made all this money in, as a sort of actor, as a writer, but mainly as a businessman for the theatres that he owned, and then he died. But before he died, he retired back to Stratford-upon-Avon with his wife. Now, the reason why I say this is because actually, in his will, Shakespeare only left his wife a bed. In fact, the exact quote is written underneath the poem. "Item I give unto my wife, my second best bed." And for years, people thought that Shakespeare was, to quote another Caroline Duffy poem, a bit of a beloved sweetheart bastard. Because basically, he left his wife something almost worthless. But then some other historians came along and had a different think about it. You see, if you think about your house, think about the bed that's in the best condition in your house. And if you think about it, the bed that's in the best condition is probably the one that's used the least. And the one that's probably used the least is the guest bedroom. If you've got people staying, you want the bed to be nice for them. So probably the best bed in the house would have been the guest bed. So who had the second best bed? And it's most likely to have been the couple, the man and the wife. So this is their bed. What's more, in Shakespeare's time particularly, they didn't have IKEA or MFI. Once you bought a bed, it sort of followed you for life. So this wouldn't have just been any bed. This would have been the bed that they slept in together for their entire marriage. It would have been an important item of furniture for them. Now imagine this. Shakespeare knows he's going to die. He's approaching old age. And even though his wife is older than him, you know, he feels that, you know, if he goes first, he wants to leave her a message. Imagine the funeral. She's dressed in black. She's upset. Of course she's upset. There's not going to be any more Shakespeare plays. And then the will is being read. And in the middle of all of that tears and that sadness, the lawyer reads out, "Item I give unto my wife, my second best bed." Sort of a bit of a cheeky message from Shakespeare going, hey, remember that bed, hey? Something that might give her one last smile on her face. Something to maybe make her think of the good times and to help her through her grief. So perhaps Shakespeare wasn't such a mean guy after all. And this poem by Carol Ann Duffy is from the point of view of Anne Hathaway writing to her husband. Now you might notice that the poem's got 14 lines, and you might know that that means it's a sonnet and that Shakespeare wrote a lot of sonnets, a lot of love poems. So this is quite a nice poem because it's sort of like a love poem that his wife is writing to him. Of course he's dead and never got to read it, and it's really written by Carol Ann Duffy, not by Anne Hathaway, but you get the idea. Now this poem is just a little bit filthy. So my advice for analysing this poem is to kind of, if it sounds rude, it probably is. In fact, it might just be worth sort of engaging dirty minds, you know, onto full whack here when reading this poem, because there really is some fairly graphic stuff in here. So let's have a look. The bed we loved in was a spinning world. So she's talking about their time in bed together. The bed we lived in was a spinning world. Now the bed didn't literally spin on some sort of motor, like something from an Austin Powers film. It's just that when they were in this bed, it felt like it was spinning. You get what I'm trying to say? They had a lot of exciting times in the bed. So spinning world. Not just a bed, it becomes an entire huge kingdom for them to explore together. Of forests, castles, torchlight, cliff-top seas. Now, we don't know if Anne Hathaway ever went to see any of Shakespeare's plays, but I think these words here, forest, castles, torchlight, cliff-top seas, all refer to famous places in Shakespeare's plays. So the seas could be either the Tempest, something, you know, the shipwreck in the Tempest or in Twelfth Night. Castles could be Dunsinane or Elsinore, castles from Hamlet and Macbeth. The forest could be the Forest of Arden or the Burnham Wood, you know, Torchlight and Clifftop, you know, King Lear and that sort of thing. So it's like saying that when they were in bed together, he transformed her to a different world. He was so caring, it was like being taken to a completely different world. It's sort of like she's saying, although the rest of the world got to be taken to exciting worlds by Shakespeare through his plays, she was able to be taken to exciting worlds through their shared love. Clifftop seas where we would dive for pearls. So, you know, you read into that what you like, but really the idea here is that this is lands that they would explore together, looking for riches, and that richness, I choose to believe, is just the richness of love and companionship with another person. My lover's words, and here's important to know, every time you hear language or words being talked about in this poem, it's pretty much just a metaphor for sort of sex and kissing and all that sort of stuff. My lover's words were shooting stars which fell to earth as kisses on these lips. So you imagine these words, as he speaks, the words become these beautiful shooting stars that fly through the air and then land as kisses. I challenge you, sit down in a room and try and come up with a better simile to describe a loved one talking. My lover's words were shooting stars, metaphor, which fell to earth as kisses on these lips. You know, beautiful combination of metaphors. My body now a softer rhyme to his. You know, soft rhyme is actually a literary term. It basically refers to, you know, well, a rhyme. And if you think about a rhyme isn't just one word on its own. You never get a one-line rhyme. There has to be two or more sometimes. But it's like saying the two of them match so well together. They were a sort of soft rhyme. It's a beautiful description. Now, echo. So then his body was like a soft, their bodies were like a soft rhyme together. Now an echo, because he's dead, of course. And the memory is fading like an echo. Echo, echo, echo that fades away. Assonance. How to put this without being crude? Assonance is basically a literary term that describes patterns of vowel sounds being used repeatedly. So think about what your vowels are. Ooh, ah, yee. You know, assonance. His touch, a verb dancing in the centre of a noun. Crikey. Again, the thing to pick on is really the fact that noun and verb here are used to describe sensuous love that the two had for each other. We'll leave it there. Some nights I dreamed he'd written me. Not wanting to be crude, but he was a writer. So again, you know, she's dreaming that he's he's writing her. If he was maybe a fireman, she'd have said, "Some nights I dreamed he was putting out my fire." Oh crikey! Or if he was a policeman, "Some nights I dreamt he was arresting my attention." I don't know, but I dreamed he'd written me. In other words, you know, this is a man who concentrated so much attention into writing his plays, but she's saying that she got all of that attention concentrated just onto her, because he was a very considerate and nice man. The bed, a page beneath his writer's hands. You imagine the white sheets of the bed like a kind of a blank page, and his hands working busily over, well, you know, over her. His writer's hands. A romance and drama, a reference to his plays. But check this out, this is really clever. Played by touch, scent and by taste. Some people just say that those words suggest, you know, the sensuousness and the kind of, you know, the love and the kind of that sort of stuff. But really it's more than that. There are 5 senses, aren't there? Touch, scent, taste, sight, sound. Which 2 are missing here? Sight and sound. When you go to the theatre, which 2 senses do you use? You use sight and you use sound. So in other words, she's listing every sight, every sense, except the ones that are used in the theatre. So it's like she's saying, anyone who went to see his plays got to hear Shakespeare and got to see Shakespeare, but only she got to touch, smell and taste Shakespeare. Charming. But basically you get the idea of him performing these plays for the entire world now, really. His plays are all over the world in all sorts of languages. But there were parts that only she got to know. So Shakespeare, a man who everybody knows, you know, so many people have heard of Shakespeare. Everyone who reads his plays, you know, has a sense of his language. But only she had this. Only she had those experiences. In the other bed, the best, linking back to what I was saying earlier, our guests dozed on, so it's the guest bed, dribbling their prose. Dribbling, first of all, you think of disgust, they're just sleeping. And dribbling, but prose. Prose is actually another literary term. Poetry is obviously poetry that's set out, you know, like this, as a poem on the page. Prose is just another word for, you know, like a short story. So poetry is often considered to be much more beautiful than prose. Well, it depends on who the writer is. So it's like, in their bed, there was poetry. In the other bed, there was just prose. No rhymes, and not as much beautiful detail and language. My living, laughing love. And I love the alliteration there, you know, it just sort of the affectionate, you know, living, laughing love. Draws out the emphasis of those words. He's dead, but she's describing as living. You know, laughing, even though he's not here anymore. Because, you know, even though he's dead, that last joke, that last sort of naughty message in the will, she has this vision of him up there, still alive, laughing, and giving her a bit of a wink and a nudge. As if to say, death isn't the end. You know, we'll meet again. That sort of thing. Or maybe I'm just a bit of a slushy romantic. I hold him in the casket of my widow's head, as he held me upon that next best bed. And there's your beautiful couplet at the end. I hold him in the casket of my widow's head. Casket, you know, like a coffin of her widow's head. She holds Shakespeare in her head, like her head is the coffin. Although he's lying in a grave in Stratford-upon-Avon, if you believe the legend, apparently if you dig it up it's cursed, so don't try that in the summer holidays. She holds his body in her mind. So he's not just buried in the cold ground, he's there with her all the time. But she doesn't just hold him there like the earth upon the coffin, but she holds him with the same tenderness that he held her in that next best bed. Really moving stuff.